Steeling himself, Scourge stepped inside. The throne room was enormous, 20 meters wide and at least 40 meters long, with an arched ceiling that rose 15 meters above. Apart from the throne at the far end, it was virtually empty. The throne sat on an elevated circular pedestal, several meters in diameter. As Scourge walked forward, he noticed that the throne was facing away from him, its high back effectively blocking any view of its occupant. After a few more steps, the pedestal swiveled around, turning the throne so that it faced him. And for the first time in his life, Scourge set eyes upon the Emperor. The figure before him appeared unremarkable. The Emperor was clad in unadorned black robes, the raised hood effectively hiding his face. Yet Scourge could feel the power of the dark side emanating from him with such intensity that it caused a faint rippling of the air. The Emperor rose to his feet, and the durasteel doors swung shut behind Scourge with a booming crash. Scourge's step faltered briefly at the sound, but he continued forward. As he reached the foot of the pedestal, he dropped to one knee, bowing low, his eyes focused on a spot on the ground in front of him.
"Rise, Lord Scourge,"
the Emperor told him,
"and speak your peace."
Scourge stood up to address the Sith looming above him. The Emperor had thrown back his hood to reveal his face. His eyes were as black as the void itself. Staring into the hollow darkness of the Emperor's gaze, Scourge's mind flashed back to Nathema, and he shivered at the memory. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. His mouth was suddenly so dry, he felt as if he might choke. He swallowed hard and coughed, finally bringing up enough saliva to talk.
3 years ago, I went to serve Darth Nyriss at your request. I discovered that Darth Nyriss was a traitor. He had allied himself with separatists to kill Nyriss, and I executed him for his crimes. Your service has been noted.
There was something strange about the Emperor's voice. It didn't sound like the voice of a single being. It had an unusual echo and resonance, almost as if a great multitude were speaking his words in perfect symphony. A grim theory passed unbidden through Scourge's mind. Was it possible all those that had been consumed by the ritual on Nathema still existed in some form within the Emperor himself? Nyriss said he'd devoured them, but what if she was only partially correct? What if he had imprisoned their spirits inside his own corporeal form, slowly feeding on their life energy over 1,000 years to keep himself young and strong? Scourge pushed such thoughts away. He needed to focus. One wrong word and the Emperor might see through his lies.
I continued to serve Darth Nyriss after Zedrix's death, Scourge explained. And I continued to investigate the separatists.
He paused, waiting for the Emperor to ask what he'd found. After a few seconds, he realized the inquiry was not coming.
I became suspicious of one of Nyriss's advisors, a man named Secho. I turned the focus of my investigation to him, but Secho was careful. He covered his tracks well. It took me until yesterday before I was certain of his guilt. He was also secretly working with the separatists, and he suffered the same fate as Zedrix. You should speak to Darth Nyriss if you seek to be rewarded for your actions.
There was no change in his tone, but the implied threat was clear. This is beneath me, and you are wasting my time. Scourge swallowed hard, his mouth dry once more.
That is not why I have come before you. Among Sechel's effects, I found these data files.
He held up the discs.
They show that Darth Nyriss was not the only member of the Dark Council to betray you. He was merely sacrificed to keep the involvement of the others secret. Darth Nyriss was also involved in the plot, along with several others.
The Emperor had no physical reaction to the revelation. He stayed as still and calm as death itself. But the air around Scourge seemed to grow colder.
Are you certain of these accusations? I would stake my life on them, my Lord Emperor.
You already have.
Scourge felt a shiver trace its way down his spine, and he knew that far more than his life was at risk. The Emperor was no longer a member of the Sith species. His power and immortality had transformed him into a being unique in the galaxy. When he spoke of life and death, it had far deeper meaning than the mere physical existence of the lesser beings that served him.
Does Nyriss know you are here?
No. I came to you as soon as I deciphered the data on Sechel's discs.
There was a long silence, and Scourge had the distinct impression that the Emperor was somehow communicating with someone outside the room. A few seconds later, the doors to the throne room opened, and Captain Yari strode in, accompanied by a Sith wearing the same dark robes as the Emperor. They approached Scourge, and the robed Sith held out his hand expectantly. Scourge handed him the discs.
Keep Lord Scourge in custody until this matter is settled.
Forgive me, Lord Emperor,
Scourge said, speaking quickly but trying to keep his tone humble.
But Nyriss is expecting my return. If I am absent, she will grow suspicious.
The Emperor's dark eyes seemed to flicker with annoyance, and Scourge feared he had gone too far. The best he could hope for as punishment for his insolence would be a quick and relatively painless death. However, when the Emperor spoke again, it was not to pass judgment on him.
You are bold to speak to me in this way, and because you are right, I will reward your initiative. This time. When Nyriss falls, you will be first in line for her seat on the Dark Council.
Thank you, Lord Emperor,
Scourge said with a bow.
If your information proves false, however, you will suffer a fate more terrible than anything you can imagine.
As he spoke, the dark circles of his eyes seemed to fill with a swirling red mist, and for a brief instant the Emperor gave Scourge a glimpse of his true self. Scourge cried out in anguish as the Emperor's mind brushed against his. Then he collapsed to the floor, shaking like a child. The touch lasted less than a second, but in that time he witnessed indescribable horrors that dwarfed anything the dark side could conjure even in his worst nightmares. And beneath the formless terrors lurked the unbearable void, the pure emptiness of total annihilation. It was over as quickly as it had begun, the awful vision retreating into his subconscious like a repressed memory as Scourge picked himself up off the floor. Neither Captain Yari nor the robed Sith made any move to help him. "Come with me," the captain said once he was on his feet. Only then did Scourge notice that the Emperor had retaken his seat on the throne, and that the pedestal had spun around to face away from him. The dark-robed Sith stayed behind as Yari led Scourge out of the throne room and into the hall beyond.
I see why you tried to talk me out of this,
Scourge muttered as they made their way back toward the Citadel's main entrance.